Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. I have been watching your work for a little bit. Actually, I think you started this long before I did.
Nice
It
to
was
meet you.
great to see you in that space. Tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Ryan Hawley. You know me as Coach Ryan, and you can find me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And I am a relationship coach. I do specialize in attachment. I do have a particular focus on avoidant attachment, but I also do work with other attachment styles as well. And I have personal experience in life that brought me to the point where I became fascinated in attachment theory. And I also have convenience of having family members that work in the field as well. So I come from it from personal experience, but also from family background experience combined with a lot of research and a lot of time and a lot of clients. And I am very excited to be here because I've been looking at your work as well, and I do really appreciate a lot of what you do.
Thank you. Thanks. What drove you in the direction of attachment theory? I mean, what personal experience drove you to doing this?
Well, it actually started out when I had a long-term relationship. I'm going to keep things relatively vague because I'm not here to, obviously bring out any personal details of anybody, but I was in a long-term relationship with somebody who's very narcissistic. And I came out of that and I understood what narcissism was. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to go through that again. I had no clue before that. And then my very first relationship after that ended up being with somebody who was clearly dismissive avoidant. It felt like I got it right this time. Everything felt wonderful. It was like perfect. And then out of nowhere, blindsided by text, and that was that. And I was like, what the heck just happened? Beside myself. And that actually hurt worse. It was a 5-month relationship. That hurt worse than losing the long-term 9-year relationship. So I went down the deep dive, I went down the rabbit hole and became fascinated by it. And even long after personally healing, I recognized that there's a need for more information in this sphere, more understanding. A lot of people are going through it. A lot of relationships fail due to attachment issues and a lot of misunderstandings out there. And I figured more information, the better. And I just really felt a calling to it and made it my passionate career.
Yeah, it is a wonderful career. I love doing what we do. You said that the 5 month relationship hurt more when it ended than the 9 months. Why do you think that happens? Because I mean, both of us, I'm sure you too. I would have clients who, after 3 months of dating, they're devastated. What do you think account for that?
There's a couple different things. One is that it just feels so good, so real, like you got it right. You feel like it's just this feeling like, wow, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel validated, desired like I never have before. And also, the ending happens in the honeymoon phase of the relationship, which is where you don't expect it to end, especially when it's going so well. So your brain is not wired to expect an abrupt ending to the relationship out of nowhere without any real explanation or warning signs beforehand. Your dopamine levels, your oxytocin levels are running high early on, and there's an abrupt cutoff. And there's also a bit of a withdrawal in your brain. Those are the feel-good hormones that go off, especially early in a relationship. And it's pretty traumatic.
How do you think we're responsible for that? Like, if I'm getting into a relationship and what is it you think I can do so that after 3 months, I don't feel like I'm going to be devastated if this person leaves? How can
There's
I take responsibility?
there's definitely things that we can do on our end. And that's to remind yourself first and foremost to stay grounded. You really don't know this person yet. And to and essentially keep a healthy guard, not walls up, but let this person reveal themselves to you. Approach it with the mindset of let them show you who they are. Everybody puts their best foot forward. But when you put so much stock into it early on, you are setting yourself up for potential disaster. And especially if you're coming at this with a more anxious attachment, you are also tying your self-worth subconsciously into the validation that you get from this person. So when they reject you, even though it's not necessarily a rejection of you in the sense, but it feels like it, you're tying your self-worth into that rejection, which makes it all that much more painful.
Yeah, and I think what happens is that the anxious attached and the avoidant attached, we are people who project what we need in a relationship onto the other person. So you'll find I'm from an anxious attached background or my past. What I could do now is reflect upon who I was in those relationships, and it was always someone who felt like I had to be understanding. I had to find a way to agree or see their point of view, even when I didn't. And it was coming from a place of, I'm afraid I'm going to lose this person. I'm afraid. So a lot of times I hear people say, and I've done this too, right? No, I've been good and I've been kind and I've been supportive and I wish I showed up. And they're the ones who pulled away. I'm the good one. I'm the healed one. I'm the one who reads all the self-help books. I'm the one who does the work on myself. So it's their fault. But what we have to look at is, why was I doing that? Why did I jump in? Like you said, we don't know this other human being. We don't know who they are. We should not be, it's dangerous. We're setting ourselves up. I mean, I
It
don't want
could
to
be
get into
worse
the
than
serial
someone with a
killers in the world that are
exactly.
perfectly normal, right? You meet someone, you want to take your time, get to know them. And I've gotten the question like, okay, how long does it take to get to know a person? You need to see this person in multiple settings, not just sit there and talk to them. You want to see how they interact with their family members. If they have kids, how their kids are interacting with them, because you could start to see if learn about this person's ability to set boundaries. If you can't set boundaries with your kids, if you can't set boundaries with your exes, if you can't set boundaries with your parents, then you might not be able to set a boundary that's going to keep me safe or the relationship safe. So you have to see them in different settings. We know, we've heard this so many times, the way a person speaks to the waiter is the way they're going to speak to you. That's another way. How are they interacting with the person that does not have an earning the way they earn? That sort of thing, right? So, and it takes a long, long time. Now, personally, I find, and it's been helpful for my clients, to hold off on getting physically intimate in relationships because it can very well cloud our judgment. What do you think about this thought?
I fully agree with that 100%. I think withholding on that is actually a very good idea. I mean, there's biological reasons. I mean, physical intimacy boosts oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, and you can find yourself bonding to a person that really isn't right for you or worse. And guess what? That applies to men too. It's not just women.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I think also, it's like we get into a lot of women will say, "Oh, I can handle it." Guys do. I can handle it. And what the women forget is that you just need to cuddling and you get a good kick of oxytocin, and that's what you want to keep going for. And before you know it, 3 months, 4 months in, when the avoidant attached can't suffocate their feelings or their need for space and independence, a little bit of independence anymore, they start to withdraw. And by then, you are already locked into this relationship and you feel like you've, especially for an anxious attached style person where time is a little different for them. 3 months might just feel like 3 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Especially when you're bonding.
Yeah. The question that I want to ask you is on how can we navigate our minds or control our thought process so that we don't get so caught up in these relationships where we're thinking after 3 months we're in it for years.
That is a big challenge, but the messages that you send yourself are profoundly important. And it's not just the words you say, but it's the actions you take, because the actions you take also send a message. So when you are holding boundaries with yourself, for example, like I'm not going to rush into physical intimacy quickly, you're sending yourself that message that I am being cautious. I am respecting myself. I am following through with what I say, that I am letting myself get to know this person first. And reminding yourself of certain things like my self-worth is not dependent on this person, and reminding yourself of that consistently, because the human mind learns in repetition. The more you repeat anything, the more ingrained it's going to become in your head. And that includes through your actions. So you have to consistently make sure your actions on the outside are showing up in a healthy way that is healthy for you. And you also need to make sure that your thought processes are. And when you find yourself going down that rabbit hole of how wonderful they are, it's important to ground yourself and say, okay, they're showing me these great things, but I don't know this about them yet. I don't know this about them yet. I don't know that, that, and that. So let me find out who they are. And
Yeah.
these little reminders will help keep you grounded so you are not going all in with a person that you really don't know yet.
Yeah, and it actually helps the relationship, especially when there's a dynamic of the avoidant and the anxious attached person. A lot of times, the anxious attached feels like this is something that they need to do, as well as the avoidant attached. They feel like the other person expect them to come in strongly or have that physical relationship early in the relationship, whereas if the avoidant attached can only build up a little bit of courage to say, hey, I like to take things a little slow. I don't know you. It takes me a while to trust someone. Is they're afraid to say that. They're afraid like that's not the right thing to say. That's not what rom-coms and what we're saying on social media advises them to do. You must make a big effort. You must show that big gesture to let this person know you're interested. But I think what can really, really help us is to be authentic. If an anxious attached person doesn't feel like really genuinely feel like taking your relationship to the next level, and you push through that fear, that discomfort to please the other person, you're also, like what you were just saying, telling your body that this is the normal now. This is what we have to do. Next thing you know, you can't speak up for yourself in any situation because your body is going to be fighting with your mind.
If Also, if you are forcing yourself through discomfort or things that you don't really want to please the other person, you're actually sending yourself the message that their feelings, their needs are more important than your own. And that actually pushes you further into insecurity. And it really doesn't matter whether you're an avoidantly attached person or anxious.
Yeah, and what we find a lot is that those persons who can be authentic, who can say, this is how I feel. Can we discuss this? Those are the ones who are respected, and you will find that the person you're attracted to wants to be with you. Nothing is more attractive than a person just being real, being themselves, and not being afraid that if I speak up, the other person's going to leave. And I think, being in the mind of an anxious attached style person, it's no, I've learned that I have to keep showing up. I have to give this person what I believe they want.
Well, it ties into boundaries. I mean, really, which are your limits? And there's two major reasons why, I mean, there's other reasons, but there's two primary reasons why people don't hold boundaries. One is the fear of a conflict. If I express my needs, my feelings on it, there might be a conflict, there might be an argument. Or the other one is if I express my needs, my feelings on this, the other person might leave. So
Yeah.
rather than expressing yourself and holding your limits, you self-sacrifice and you cater to please the other person, and there's consequences to that for both parties.
I think one of the big problems for a lot of both attachment styles is they don't know exactly what a boundary looks like
Mhm.
or how to go about setting a boundary. My personal experience was looking at what felt right, and again, when you're healing an attachment style, you need to pause. You really need to slow everything down and be with your body and ask a ton of questions. Why am I doing this? So, to respond to what someone else might be expecting, you may not be able to respond in a timely manner. Simple things as a text message, someone working out in a gym, right? A text message comes in. How do I teach myself to love myself? I've got to slow down and tell myself, this is my time at the gym. I am not going to look at that message. Or this is my time at the gym. I will respond to this message when I'm done putting myself first. right? And then having to ask yourself, does this feel comfortable and right for me? And that's the only way that we'll move from a place that's not fear based.
Mhm.
Because if I push myself aside and say, okay, you know what, the gym can wait, I'll respond to this person. Again, like you said, I'm telling myself that their needs are more important and I don't matter. Now, a lot of people will say, well, isn't that selfish to put yourself first? What do you think of the concept of selfish? Because a lot of people think it's a negative thing. Are you on that page?
There's good and bad. There's good and bad selfishness. Making sure you're not neglecting your needs, making sure that you are standing up for yourself in a healthy way is good. But when you are completely lacking empathy and not considering the other person at all in any aspect, if you're doing things that are pretty hurtful and doing so without even consideration, that's the unhealthy selfishness. So it all depends on the perspective of it. There is times where you do need to be selfish, and that's a healthy thing. There's times where it really isn't healthy, especially when there's no empathy involved.
Do you think that it would be helpful for the avoidant attached person to learn how to speak up and ask for their needs to be
Oh,
met or respected, not met, respected? And perhaps that's going to help the anxious attached not feel or not believe that the avoidant attached is selfish. Because I work with a number of avoidant attached persons, and they're always thinking of how best they can show up for their partner. They are people pleasers, just like the anxious attached. The problem, though, is that they don't share their thoughts and feelings. And so the other person, the anxious attached, is left feeling like this person never really cared or considered me. And of course, yeah, we have to remember it's difficult for an avoidant attached person to empathize as well, but it is possible.
they absolutely can empathize. And here's the thing too, is that we often, myself included, can paint with a broad brush, but each individual is also a unique person. There are people that obviously have different inherent characters and values within each attachment style. So there is a lot of variance when it comes to stuff like that. And that does play a factor in how they also show up. But that said, if they were to actually express their needs, it would actually go a long way in general, in most cases, for the anxious attacher to feel that the other person's not being as selfish. Due to the lack of communication, it comes across as if the feelings and the needs of the anxious attacher were never considered. In some cases, they genuinely weren't considered. In some cases, they were, but the person feared communication. Obviously, we can't read the minds, but it appears on the outside as if they're only thinking of themselves.
Mhm. Well, there's something that I've also noticed. The anxious attached starts the relationship. They make the plans. They generally will initiate the meetup. Generally.
Not
Let's
always.
meet. Have a great, no, not always, generally, right? Let's meet up. Great. We have a great time. Many cases, again, the anxious attached will reach out. Had a great time. Lovely to see you. It would be nice if we do that again. The avoidant attached reciprocates. Sure, let's go out. And then you find the anxious attached might say, how about we check out this other place? They're constantly thinking about the relationship. We know this about the anxious attached, right? How to bring the person closer to me. Now, it does not allow the avoidant attached person to initiate. And how we set ourselves up as an anxious attached person is because they're people pleasers, because they want to be liked. We don't know if it's genuine. We don't know if they really do want to meet up a second time or a third time, or they just want to be liked. All right. Now, as the anxious attached, let's say we just keep initiating, setting up the meetings, planning the trips, all of it. 3 to 4 months, we start to build resentment because by that time we're realizing, wait a second, this person has not really shown up. They're not making an effort. They're not reaching out, asking me to meet up with them. They're not planning anything. They're just sitting there waiting. Is it possible that we're not giving them space to initiate?
Of
Is it
course.
perhaps better if we could now learn, because this is going to be a part of an anxious attached healing, to sit back and allow people who could see our worth and value, people who want to be in our space, to come towards us instead of it looking as though we're begging or chasing them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to allow the person, even if you don't know their attachment style, to make moves towards you as well, because that's when people do that, that is a strong way of saying that, yeah, this interest is mutual. It's not a one-way street. You have to give that person the opportunity. If you are constantly the one doing it, then yeah, you're leaving that room for doubt to know if they are really wanting this or if they're people pleasing, and you're not really gauging their true interest level, because if you allow them a chance, their interest level is going to be shown through their actions, and you might not be allowing them that space. But again, this is where the avoidant attacher struggles, because they're probably not communicating that either, due to the different fears and people pleasing tendencies, which both, by the way, insecure attachment styles and disorganized can all be people pleasers,
Mhm.
for very similar reasons, actually, wanting to be liked. Um, I have seen a lot of cases, though, quite a few, where where early on, especially when there haven't been any attachment wounds triggered, where the avoidant attach will actually make a lot of initiating on plans, trips, things like that too. It's not always that way, although it is more frequently the anxious attacher. But there are a good share of avoidant attachers that early on, because those avoidant wounds haven't necessarily been poked at yet, show up differently early on.
Could that be because those with that fearful avoidant attachment style are closer on the spectrum of the fearful, closer to the anxious? Maybe they exhibit more of that anxious attachment tendencies than they do the dismissive. So I feel like it's on that spectrum. And I have met a fearful avoidant who acts more on the anxious attached style than they do. And it could flip. It depends. I find too that when you're a secure attached person, the the fearful avoidant may be more in the anxious state than they are in the avoidant state, right? And that could be because as a secure attached, you're not chasing. You're sitting back. You're comfortable speaking up as well. And so it keeps them in a place of always trying to work things out or think of how best to come towards forward in the relationship. So my advice has always been to the anxious attached, like, work on your healing, learn to set your boundaries, learn to love yourself, see your value, see your worthiness, and not chase. And the relationship dynamics do take a beautiful and massive turn.
Chasing is always a mistake in general. I mean, it's always a massive mistake, because you're not when you're chasing somebody, you're actually really not respecting your own self-worth. You know, you're trying to earn the love from the other person, and it's not that it's bad to want to be loved by this person, but you also are respecting yourself by not chasing and allowing them to come towards you, because you're telling yourself, well, this is a two-way street. It's not just me having to prove my worth to this other person. So that right there perpetuates anxiousness. A lot of the anxious attached behaviors really become a almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you do things that actually just make you more anxious and you don't even realize it. And we can only
Yeah,
control ourselves. You can never control how the other person is going to show up, but you can control how you show up.
yeah, that's true. And I think it's the only way that we can feel better about ourselves when we take responsibility and say, you know what, I am responsible for how I feel. I'm responsible for what I allow another person to do to me or not do to me. One of the things that can be frustrating for me a little bit, and I think it's perhaps it might just trigger my memories into how I was in past relationships, is when I see that the narrative on my page at least kind of leans towards, let's take the avoidant, burn them on a stake. They're all horrible people. They're all bad people. And I don't believe that's the case at all. And I remember being an anxious attached person. I was just really, really angry that I was doing so much to receive this love and the affection and the attention that I needed. And how dare this person for not changing to make me happy? I didn't see that I wasn't so sweet and peachy in the relationship either. I couldn't respect them. I wanted to control them. And I think a lot of us with an anxious attachment style, it's hard to see that. How can we help a person see that, reflect on their behaviors as well and see how that can be hurtful to the person with the avoidant attachment style?
It really does go both ways. There's always culpability to be passed around. And there's a lot, and I've had this content on this. I mean, plenty of avoidant attachers are good people. Plenty of anxious attachers are good people. But there are some anxious attachers as well as avoidant attachers that really don't have that great a character. It's all up to the individual. For example, insecurely attached people as a whole are more likely to cheat in a relationship than a secure attacher. But that said, the majority of insecurely attached people do not cheat, which means that character is a factor, right? Because if you had no control over anything and it was just your attachment wounds, then every insecure person would cheat. But that's not the case because the character of the individual matters, and that's a thing I try to just to a point I try to make because no, they shouldn't be burned at the stake. Now, people that are good people can sometimes do things that are hurtful to other people, and we can separate the behavior, the insecure behavior, from the person and their worth and their character. But then, of course, there are certain things that are absolutely choices as well. So, it's not all black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray in there. But what I do find personally from the majority of avoidant attachers that I work with, that they are actually good people.
Yeah, they are. I think, I do believe that we have so many sides to us. And the other person in the relationship, like you said, I might just say something or do something without the intention of hurting someone. But based on their trauma wounds and how they're triggered, they could very well interpret what I say as something that hurts them. And I do believe that for the most part, humans are good and we want to show up for the
For the
people
most
in
part,
our
yeah.
lives, right? Now, it's entirely up to us if we can accept this person for who they are in the relationship with us, or we let them go.
And this is one of the biggest confusing area, absolutely. One of the most confusing areas that people have is determining severe insecure attachment from things like narcissism, but intent is really the biggest thing. The more insecure, by the way, narcissistic people can often come across as anxious attachers and they can often come across as avoidant attachers, but the intent is just so vastly different. Insecurely attached people in general, whether they are avoidant or anxious, do not go in with the goal of I'm going to hurt this person. Now they may do things because they're so focused on soothing their own insecurities and wounds and anxiety that they may do things that when even the anxious or avoidant attacher is calmed down, say, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't kind. But it's not done with the intent of hurting. Now, a more narcissistic person, and if you wade into full blown personality disorder, sometimes those are the people that will intentionally do it to hurt, but it's all for vastly different intentions.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I have a note here. I want to come back to asking the question, what is the difference? Because a lot of people will often meet someone who's an avoidant attached person and they label them as a narcissist. And a lot of times, the avoidant attach will label the anxious attach as someone who's got bipolar disorder
Hmm.
or a split personality disorder. And but what is, if you can share with us, what is the difference between someone with a narcissistic personality disorder and an avoidant attachment style?
Well, and first of all, the intent and where it comes from is really vastly different. So there are commonalities between insecure attachment and narcissistic personality disorder. And one of the commonalities is this deep wound of shame. This deep wound of shame, feeling like you're worthless, unlovable, and it's more pronounced even in a person with a personality disorder. But the way the person reacts to this core wound of shame, a person with a narcissistic personality disorder creates something called a false self, which is this image of themselves that they project to the world, and they convince themselves that their false self is who they actually are, and it's a perfect person. And taking any kind of accountability or admitting wrongdoing would shatter that false self. Um, and it, whereas an insecurely attached person doesn't have that false self. An avoidant attacher doesn't have that false self. They really want love and they really do want connection. Whereas the true narcissist is not seeking love in the traditional sense. They are seeking narcissistic supply, which is the attention, validation, adoration, and power and control that they feel entitled to. And when it power and control is a very important thing for a narcissistic person. They have to always be in the power position in the relationship. That is not the case with an avoidant attacher. They are not seeking power. Now, they can appear like it when they're taking distance, but it's to soothe their nervous system. But a narcissistic person does it to maintain the power position. So, for example, the silent treatment is an example I like to use. The silent treatment from a narcissist is vastly different than when an avoidant goes quiet. The narcissist is doing that to punish you. They're doing it to get retribution, to see you squirm, to make you suffer so they can get their way. And if they see a reaction out of you, it makes them feel good because it makes them feel powerful. They're relevant. They can get under your skin. When an avoidant goes quiet, it's because their nervous system is dysregulated. Their brain is flooded with anxiety and they can't even get themselves to speak. So they just shut down and take space so they can regulate themselves again. But it's not done with the intent of punishing the other person. That is a vastly big difference. And insecure attachment is a learned behavior, whether it's avoidant or anxious, and any learned behavior can be unlearned and replaced with something else. Of course, the person doing that has to want it. But if you're dealing with full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, that is a personality disorder. It's not just a learned behavior. In rare cases, narcissists can work on themselves, but it's not very common and not very likely. And avoidant attacher can absolutely love. They can absolutely feel empathy. Those are two very difficult emotions for a narcissist to experience. In most cases, the closest that a narcissist can actually come to love is loving the attention that you give them, loving what you give them. Their view of the world is completely different too. The avoidant attacher, even though they have their insecurities, they live in the same universe that the anxious attacher does. The narcissist is the center of the universe. The sun, the moon, the stars all orbit around them, and they don't really view people in the traditional sense as independent, autonomous beings. They view people as things to extract supply from, and they view their partner as actually an extension of themselves, not necessarily an individual. So early in the relationship, when the narcissist love bombs, it seems like they're heaping this praise on you, but they're actually praising themselves because they are so wonderful. Therefore, you are wonderful, and you're wonderful because they're wonderful. So when
And they've
they're
also chosen you.
correct,
If I choose you, you must be perfect.
right.
Yeah, carry on. I
Mhm.
just wanted to
Oh,
stick that right.
absolutely. Well, they've convinced themselves that they are perfect, so therefore their partner must be perfect. So when they're praising you, it's because they're praising themselves, and it's completely different with an avoidant attacher. And when they are coming, and especially the ones that do come on pretty strong early on, they're doing it because they genuinely, at least in the moment, believe and feel what they're saying. They're not doing it for the intention of manipulating the other person. For example, with a more dismissive avoidant, they'll be telling, because early on their fears haven't been triggered yet, they'll be thinking, oh my God, I got it right. This person's great. I finally found the right one, et cetera, et cetera. There's no manipulative intent behind that. That they really believe they got it right. Now, when fears get triggered and things like that, obviously there's insecurities, but it was never for the intent of manipulating you and getting you under their control. With a narcissistic person, it absolutely is.
Yeah, and I find that I don't talk a whole lot about narcissism, but a narcissistic, let's just call him a narcissist. I'm not going to go with a personality disorder
Yeah,
lengthy label here. Let's just say a narcissist. It's a false sense of confidence, whereas an avoidant attached person, they can admit that they're not very confident. They're
absolutely.
often they're often beating up on themselves. Whereas with a narcissist, it's no, I am powerful, I am wonderful, you're lucky to be with me.
Hmm.
And an avoidant attached person is saying, you're wonderful, why would you choose me?
Exactly. And actually, this is something I tried to explain to people when, for example, when the avoidant is ending a relationship saying things like, I can't give you what you need, you deserve someone that can love you the way you deserve to be loved, they genuinely believe it. They do. They believe often this person is believing I'm inevitably going to disappoint you. I'm not good enough. It's coming from a place of insecurity. When the narcissist when the narcissist throws you out, you're of no use to them anymore. They've got what they wanted from you, and that's it. You don't matter. It's like the same way you throw out the empty yogurt container when you're done eating the yogurt. It's there it is so vastly completely different, and that it's really almost even completely, I would say, unfair to the person that is simply just avoidant attached, or when they get accused of being a narcissist, because they really aren't. But it comes from misunderstanding, and I understand people feel hurt, they feel pain, they want to hurl things like that. But obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't read minds, but from my experience, I feel like I've gotten pretty decent at detecting when I'm talking to a client where they think they're dealing with an avoidant, and it's like, I don't think this person's actually an avoidant. I really do believe you're dealing with a
Hmm.
narcissist here, because there is a distinct level of coldness and cruelty that you see from a narcissist that you don't see from an avoidant. Now, avoidants can do things that are hurtful. Don't misunderstand. We're all human beings. We're all capable of doing things that are wrong. But when an avoidant attacher does something hurtful, in many cases, there's usually at least some degree of them acknowledging, like, that was wrong, I'm sorry, maybe not going and correcting course, but at least acknowledgement. You're just not going to get that from a narcissist. From a narcissist, if they did something terrible to you, it's your fault. For example, if they cheat on you, it's your fault, not theirs, because you didn't give them what they needed. And it's like it's their God-given right to do whatever they want. Now, keep in mind, this whole narcissistic persona is just a mask for the inner shame, but they're very good at even deluding themselves that they are so wonderful and perfect.
Yeah, I think it's also, consistency. Is this person, are they consistent in their behavior when it comes to apologizing? So the person, an avoidant attached person, may not apologize right away, but at some point you'll notice in their action, you'll notice that they do feel sorry and they're showing up in a particular way that expresses their feelings. Or they may come around and say, I'm sorry, I did that. Whereas the narcissist is just going to launch right into gaslighting you and making you believe that this is all on you. The way they treat you is all on you, and you're never going to get an apology. And you have to understand that when you're not getting that apology, it's got nothing to do with you. Again, it's that narcissist cannot feel less than. It's
Like,
their way of protecting themselves. So they're out to get you because they're going to feel better. Now, even the coming back after the relationship ends, the narcissist just sends you your way. Even the coming back between the two, a narcissist and a person with an avoidant attachment style, it's very different. The narcissist comes back to show themselves that they still have control of you.
mhm.
They're still coming back to see, oh, I need to make sure that I still have a hold on you.
The
I don't
Hoover.
really want you. The avoidant attached is coming back because they have processed their and taken responsibility for how they showed up in the relationship and may feel some remorse, may want to give this another chance, but they're coming in slowly because they're still not sure.
And scared.
And they're
And
scared. Yeah, they're
scared.
scared of rejection. Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're scared of rejection, scared of it failing, scared of being hurt. I mean, there's a lot of fear involved when it comes to avoidant attachment. That it's not, the fear is not necessarily really there with the narcissist. Now, when the narcissist comes back, well, I mean, it's to show that they still have power and control, and that they are so wonderful that they can throw you out and you still desire them. Look at me, I'm so wonderful. It's just to get that confirmation of how amazing that they are. So it's completely different intention, and a narcissist will come right back in, and just try to go sweep you off your feet, love bomb you all over again. But it's inevitably going to have the same outcome.
Yeah, and I feel like the thing that makes it so difficult to leave either one, the narcissist, they have really broken you down to a point where you've forgotten who you are.
And by the
You have
way,
no sense of self. Yes.
both this is something that a lot of people don't realize. Insecure attachers, It doesn't matter whether you're talking about disorganizing, fearful, avoidant, dismissive, or anxious, are far more prone to get into a relationship with a narcissist than a secure attacher for different reasons. Now, keep in mind, different narcissists will show up in different ways, and that can, depending on what kind of narcissist you're dealing with, can depend on whether a particular attachment style is going to gravitate towards it. But it is the insecurities that insecure attachers have, that self-doubt and the lack of boundaries, that a narcissistic person is able to capitalize on. And it's not just anxious attachers. Avoidant attachers do get sucked into narcissistic relationships as well.
Oh, yeah, because we are so desperate for that love and affection that a narcissist knows exactly how to give to us at the
And when
very
not
beginning
to.
of the relationship. Yeah. So, and this brings us right back to why it's so important to slow down when you meet someone and take your time getting to know them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you might be dealing with the person with insecure attachment, but you could be getting sucked into a person that is far worse than an insecure attacher. You could be getting sucked into a relationship with a narcissist, which, by the way, you made a good point. It takes an average of 7 attempts to successfully leave a narcissist when you're in a long-term relationship with them.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for this. This has been so, so interesting. I'm glad we touched on, the difference between narcissism and avoidant attachment style, because I do, but a lot of times people will say to me, like, oh, you must be a narcissist, you must be an avoidant, and that's why you're advocating for those with an avoidant attachment style. I come from an anxious attachment style, and now, reflecting upon my past relationships, those relationships were with people who were trying their best. And, it was like, oh, I would love for us to have another discussion where we talk about really what communication is, because a lot of times we talk, we shout, but we're not quite communicating. There, a lot of it is left unsaid, where we're assuming that the other person should know what we really mean.
Mhm.
Right. And I would love to talk about that some more in another discussion. But yeah, it's an avoidant attached person is just as an anxious attached person. You just want to be loved, you want to be accepted. And we have a hard time letting people know exactly what our needs are, because we're so afraid that if we speak up, we're going to lose this person. And we've already seen so many sweet, wonderful things about them that we don't want to lose them.
Absolutely. And it's actually interesting too, is that there's a lot of commonalities between an anxious attacher and an avoidant attach. More commonalities than people realize. A lot of the fears, the insecurities are actually very similar, but the difference is how the avoidant attached and the anxious attached have learned to react to those fears through different behaviors, but the root fear is very similar. And it's more prominent and pronounced with an anxious attacher, but an avoidant attached does actually fear abandonment too. There's fear of rejection. There's fears of, there's fears that permeate through, but they just, due to their environments, their temperament, their childhood, have learned to respond, or actually rather react to those fears through different behavior.
Yeah, and it's another thing that we hear a lot is that people will say, "Well, I'm so anxious. I'm going through this disruption in my relationship, and I am so anxious. I must be an anxious attached person." You really get down to it, it's an avoidant attached person.
They feel anxiety.
We all feel anxiety, and it's necessary for our survival. We're human beings. Without that feeling of anxiety, we won't know what's dangerous and what's not. So the difference with the attachment style is that the way we react and we respond. One will shut down or walk away or just can't handle something uncomfortable in that time. And whereas the anxious attached wants to solve the issue, they're able to communicate in the moment of distress. That's
It's
just the
fight, flight, or
difference.
freeze. And the anxious person tends to choose fight. The avoidant attached tends to choose flight or freeze. But it's still that same anxiety underneath the surface.
Yeah, and both of them can choose fawn, which is not one that we talk about a lot. It's where you just cower down and you take it, or you're just unable to get the words out. It's there's just so much to this. I am hoping that we can do this another time. Again.
Absolutely.
All
100%.
right,
Loved it.
perfect. Thank you so much. Anything you'd like to end with? How do people find
Just
you again? Just remind them
yeah.
again how they find you.
Find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as Coach Ryan. And of course, just with any other person doing this, there's going to be unfortunately spam accounts out there. Look for the follower account. That's me. And I would love to have you follow me, check out my content, and I really appreciate you having me on here because you have some excellent content as well, and I think
Oh,
everybody should check it out too.
thank you. Thank you very much for joining me.